Hey, Russell Graves here, and while it's a beautiful day outside, I'm actually getting ready to go on a photo trip, and thought I'd take this time to make a quick video about some new camera gear that I just recently upgraded to. It's been a long time coming. With the DSLR cameras starting to kind of become antiquated to some degree, I know some of the manufacturers are still coming out with a few models, but it looks like companies like Canon, like I use, have committed to DSLRs in their future. And so with the writing on the wall, I've known for a while it's going to be time to switch over to DSLRs. The problem I've always had though is, cameras are expensive. I mean, you're talking for the lower end DSLRs, $3,000. For the upper end that's coming out, the Canon EOS R3, it's going to be about $6,000, $6,500. I can't remember. So it's pretty expensive. And for me, it kind of runs into a situation where, I'm a small business owner. I take pictures for a living, and that's what I do for a living. And so one of the things I learned early on from a business standpoint is you can't always control how much money you make, especially in the days of the pandemic when assignments were being cut out and travel was being limited. You can't always control how much money you're going to make, but you can always control how much you spend. And so with that thought in mind and really trying to limit my expenses, I've been dragging my feet on mirrorless. And back in September, I was on a trip to Katmai to photograph bears, had a group of photographers there with me that I was leading on a photo tour. And looking at some of their cameras, the Sonys and some of the Canons that they had, the mirrorless cameras, I just knew it was time to switch. It's either, not necessarily now or never, but now or it's going to be a while. And so with that thought in mind, I recently picked up some cameras. And I thought a long time about what I was going to do. I've used Canon for a long time. Before Canon, when I first got started in photography, I used Minolta cameras. And so I'm not necessarily brand loyal to any of them. I mean, I like Canons just because that's what I use, but it's not like I'm sponsored by Canon or I'm not one of their explorers of light shooters or anything like that. I mean, I just use a product because that's the product that's convenient to me. So with that in mind, I really was looking to maybe just use this as a start over point to try to figure out if I wanted to stick with Canon or whether I wanted to switch to someone like Sony, because I don't know if you've looked at Sony cameras or not lately, but they're magnificent bodies and lenses and just packed with features, and they're really, really, really nice cameras. And so I thought about switching to Sony, but really in the end, the reason I didn't switch is I kind of alluded to it earlier, and the reason why I didn't switch is because of what I said earlier. It's all about money, and it's all about trying to keep a business afloat and trying to thrive in that business and make money so you can do stuff like pay your living expenses and pay for children's college. So with that in mind, the reason I didn't ultimately switch to Sony in the end was just because of money. I mean, not that Canon cameras are any less expensive, but if I was to replicate my entire Canon lens lineup in Sony and I couldn't do a one-for-one match on all of them, like for example, I've got a Canon 85mm f1.2 lens that I absolutely love. I use it a lot, especially on magazine shoots that I do. And to replicate that, Sony just doesn't make a lens like that. They make an f1.4, and look, I don't know if it makes much difference between a 1.2 and a 1.4, but I do know I like that Canon 85mm f1.2 lens a lot, and I wanted to keep that. But to be able to replicate everything I had with Canon, and you're talking the lenses, you're talking camera bodies, at least two, the entire flash ecosystem that I own with Canon. I have 5 flashes. I've got the wireless flash controllers. I've got all that stuff. And so to be able to replicate that in Sony, it was going to cost $50,000 to $60,000 for me to replace all that equipment. So with that in mind, I really kind of batted. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to wait for the R3 to come out. I really drug my feet for a long time, but I finally just made the decision and I went with the Canon R5. And so far, so good. I only bought one body this time, and I bought it with the grip on the bottom. And I like that grip because I like the flexibility of being able to hold the camera vertically in vertical orientation and have all the controls at my fingertips. I like it, the fact that it holds 2 bodies. One of the complaints I hear a lot from photographers who use mirrorless is they eat up a lot of batteries, but with putting 2 batteries in it and be able to have 2 batteries, this should allow me to shoot all day long. As far as size savings, it's not that much difference in size, and it's not that much difference in how much it weighs. But I was just anxious to move to the Canon mirrorless system, and so far it's been good. You know, I spoke a little bit about the R3 earlier, and here's what I think is going to happen. Back in the film days, and this happened in digital in a little bit different order, but back in the film days, Canon actually had a Canon EOS 5 camera, and that was one of their, I think it was one, if I remember correctly, that was one of their first Canon cameras or film cameras that they came out as they started moving from the A system, like the A1 or the F1, that were all manual focus, into the autofocus systems, and this has been back in the 90s. But Canon had a EOS 5 version, and then they had an EOS 3 version, which was kind of a rugged body, had a lot of pro specs to it. It looked like the pro body, but just wasn't quite as robust, didn't have quite the frame rate. And then they came out with the Canon EOS 1, and I had all kinds of iterations of the EOS 1s when they came out, and it was a beautiful camera, film camera. And I think what's going to happen, and I've read a little bit about this, but it kind of feels to me like they may be replicating that numbering system all over again, or Canon may be replicating that numbering system all over again. It feels to me like they're going to come out with the R5. They came out with the R5 and the R6, but the R5 will be kind of their really nice sort of prosumer version. I don't have a better word to call it, but that's what I'm going to call it. And then with the R3 coming out, it's giving you that pro specs, but if you notice, the R3 has fewer megapixels than the R5 has. And to me, that's not really a big deal at all. I do very little cropping. Really, I kind of go back to an old school film way of shooting, and that I try to get as close as I can to the subject, because you pay a lot of money for these sensors. And to me, to cut anything out of the picture, it's kind of like wasting money, because you pay for the sensors, you pay for the whole sensor, and so why would you crop any of it out if you didn't have to? So I really, especially with wildlife photography, I try to use the techniques that I've learned over the years to try to get as close as I can. And but it feels like the R5 come out first, then next will be the R3, and then in the future, I think the R1 will come out, which the R1 will probably be a high megapixel pro spec camera that's weather sealed, that'll do the high frame rate like these things can do, and it's crazy how fast they shoot these days. I expect it to be kind of an answer to, I think it's Nikon came out with the Z9 lately, and then Sony's A1. I think the R1 will be a complement to those two cameras. So my thinking was I'd buy the R5 first, probably skip the R3, and then eventually when the R1 comes out, I'll pick that up and start kind of building my ecosystem around these Canon mirrorless cameras. Now, one of the other reasons I decided to go with mirrorless is because it's fairly seamless to switch to use my EF lenses on this body. I've just got a simple adapter. I think it was about $100 to buy. It's a Canon native adapter, and so far I've used one lens with it, and that's my 500 millimeter f4, which I adore that lens. I didn't want to have to buy that lens again. They don't make it for the mirrorless yet, but they make the 600 f4 and the 400 2.8 that are dedicated to mirrorless. I don't know if they're going to end up making the 500 f4, but that 500 f4, I've had that lens for probably 10, 12, 15 years now maybe, and I adore that lens. It's been really, really good to me. I've taken care of it. I've shot countless magazine covers with it, and it's just been a fantastic lens. But I've used that lens on this R5 camera with the adapter, and it seems like it works fine. It focuses quick. It's snappy to focus. It's you know, I can't complain. I've shot a few pictures last week. I did this series that I call Whitetail Week last week. It's the whitetail rut here in Texas, so I was going out trying to shoot pictures of whitetails on 3 or 4 occasions last week, and you'll be seeing those come out in a future wildlife photo show episode. But I went out and shot those pictures with this camera. It's really kind of my first time taking this camera field, and it works fine. You know, I'm not a big gear geek where I don't understand the algorithms that these cameras use to achieve exposure or autofocus. I look at cameras like I look at my vehicle, you know, my truck. I don't need to know the firing order of the cylinders in that pickup truck. Really, all I need to know is if I turn the key, will it start? And if I put it in gear, will it go forward for me? So that's kind of the way I think about cameras. I don't really dive too far into the specs. Specs are important, but what's important for me is when I take it in the field, will it do what I want it to do, and is it pretty intuitive to use, and can I figure it out pretty quick? Because with every new camera, you're going to have a learning curve. And my learning curve on this R5, even though I've used it before, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, it kind of feels like the other Canon cameras I have. It's the menu systems are similar. It's got a few features that are different from other Canon cameras I have, and I'll go into a few of those that I like so far. And this is, again, kind of my first look video, but it's so far my first impressions of this R5 are positive, not pretty positive. I mean, they're real positive. I enjoy it, getting to know the camera. One of the first things, and I've got my notes here on my phone here, so I'm going to take a look to make sure it keeps me on track. One of the first things I was really excited about trying is the autofocus and the eye tracking. You know, you've heard a lot about that, and it's not I guess it's a fairly new technology as cameras go, but as far as it's been out for a few years, I don't know how long. But the eye focusing on this thing, it's really amazing, because on my 1D bodies that I've been using so long, my ProSpec film bodies, I'd have to constantly have my finger on the back toggle button moving the focus point around to try to compose the picture properly in camera and make sure the focus point is on the eye of the animal whenever I'm taking a picture. And again, that's my way of not having a crop later on and just being able to try to get it as right as I can in camera. And with this, I found myself with the eye tracking, the first couple of times I would instinctively reach up and try to move the point, but I realized the thing can track the eye of an animal, and it's pretty amazing how it works. And so I noticed last week when I got my pictures in of white-tailed deer moving around and being active in the wild, the percentage of keepers I had went up exponentially. You know, I didn't miss focus on an ear, I didn't miss focus on an antler. It tracked the eye and locked down on the eye. And I mean, for me and the way I shoot pictures, that part's really going to be a game changer. And what's exciting about it is that eye focus is just going to get better from this point forward. And so I was pretty excited about that. Now, here's the problem. I think this thing shoots 20 frames a second at optimum conditions. And optimum conditions is you need to use a lens that's married to it, and it's got to have enough shutter speed and all those things. But shooting at 12 frames per second last week of deer, I just noticed I had a bunch of keepers. So one of the things it's taught me over time is I'm going to have to really watch how many pictures I take, or I'm going to have a lot of pictures to go through when I get back into my computer. A few of the other things that I really like on this, and I've never really done this on any of my other cameras before, but I made a decision on this one to start the process, and that is setting up the custom menus where like C1, C2, C3. I've actually got it now where I can switch over to C1 and it's my optimized video setting. So in other words, I've got the video set at 8K, I've got the frame rate set like I want it, I've got everything set up, so really all I've got to do is switch the mode over to C1 and video, and I'm ready to go a lot quicker than having to dive through the menus and set it up. Another thing I've never really done before is reconfigure the buttons on the cameras to make them do what I want to do. And I didn't go overboard on this. I'm kind of used to where everything is. But the one thing I did do, and this is a remarkable feature of this Canon camera, it's got a crop mode. So if you've ever used like in Canon numbers like a 60D or 70D, or I've got a 90D, it's a crop sensor body. It's a 1.6 crop. So if it's a 500 millimeter, you times it by 1.6 to give you what the effective millimeter range of that lens is. And so even though this Canon R5 is a full frame sensor, with the push of a button, I can switch it over to crop sensor. And last week when I was in the field with some deer, a deer was a little far off, and then I was thinking to myself, man, I wish I was closer. And I realized that I'd programmed that button, so with just a click and rolling my finger over once to change that mode, instantly I had a 1.6 crop. So I had 1.6 times more focal length with just the push of a button. And when you do that, it affects the bokeh a little bit. Your background doesn't look the same, but in a pinch, it was really a feature that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, but it's a feature that I was really, really appreciative to have. Aside from that, the high frame rate is remarkable in this too. And again, I talked about this earlier, but just the vertical control grip and the ability to put this on a camera and extend your battery life and have all the controls at your back finger is really, really, really nice. Now, one of the things that I'll be coming with another video is I'm really going to put this thing through the paces this week. I'm headed out to Bosque del Apache in New Mexico today. Get on a plane later on this evening to head out there. And I'm leading another photo workshop out there. And when I get on the plane to head that way, I'm going to really use this camera exclusively all week to shoot not only some landscape pictures of the area, but mainly one of the most challenging things you can photograph, and that's birds in flight, and really try to get some good dynamic pictures of birds. And with that in mind, I actually picked up this lens, and this lens is a little atypical to what I'm used to using. This is Canon's new lens that they came out with for the mirrorless bodies. This is an 800 millimeter F11 lens. Now, typically, I like the wide open lenses. The F11s I'm not a fan of, but my justification on this lens was if you're shooting birds against blue sky and the sky's real far back, it really doesn't matter that you've got such a limiting focal length, limiting f-stop on this, and so, or aperture on this, and so it really didn't bother me that much. And so what I looked at is the fact that when you put this body on this camera, the fact that you've got 800 millimeters and it's just right there, and I don't know what this weighs, but it weighs hardly nothing. Now with this lens, the way that Canon makes it is it extends for shooting position, but still you don't pick up any weight, you pick up a little extra length. But just to do birds in flight, to be able to track them like that and not have to hold that 500 millimeter f4 lens, I'm pretty anxious to see how this works. So when I get done with this week, I'll come out with another video on this 800 millimeter lens and talk about it a little bit. And then I'll talk about how the camera performed in the field. Again, I've already used it in the field some, but really kind of put it through its paces on some more challenging subjects like birds moving really erratically. So can't wait to see how it works out. I'm anxious to get back in the field. I've been pretty much home. I've done some shooting around here for the past month, but I'm anxious to get back out in the field and try my hand at some more wildlife photography. So stay tuned, and I'll be sharing the results of my shoot in an upcoming video soon. Thanks.